Good morning and welcome everyone to the North Carolina Department of Information Technology's Great Grant Grantee webinar. Today we'll be discussing the project progress reporting. I'm Crystal Dickerson, the Marketing Communications Manager for the division, and we will get started momentarily. In the meantime, I wanted to make you aware of a couple of housekeeping notes. Today, we will be using the chat function. For any questions you have, please put them in the chat and we will answer them at the end. Please also include the name of your company or organization in the chat so we can make sure and address that. We are also going to record this webinar and post it later on our website. So if you need to hop off or leave, or if you want to share it with any folks that couldn't attend, we'll make sure it's available online. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Angie Bailey.
Thank you, Crystal. Thanks everyone for joining us. We are very excited that today is our first information session on actually contracted great grants. So we know this has been a long process and we really appreciate you all working with us. We know that you all are just as busy as everyone in the broadband space. So today's session is really specifically for grantees that have active federal great grant contracts to talk about progress reporting. I do want to provide a quick update on great grant overall since y'all are here with us today. So I think everyone knows we had our first set of awards in the 93 counties. Most of those are contracted. We have a handful, maybe 10-ish that are still we're still working on that contracting process. We announced last week, as I'm sure you all saw, awards, 33 additional awards. Those were second highest scoring projects within counties. And so we will always have to start working on contracting those. And then what we're looking at most immediately is they're within the completing access to broadband legislation, a county can choose to fund an unfunded great grant. So that's what we're looking at now, is how we would use CAB funds to fund some of the remaining unfunded projects. As y'all know, that can involve removal of duplicate locations and things like that. So there's a lot to it. We're working through those questions and we'll get that information out to y'all soon. I want to really thank Shannon Gerger on our team, who is our one of our grant administrators, for managing our contracting process. So thanks, Shannon, for all your work on that. And I want to thank George Collier, of course, who's our deputy director, who's been overseeing Great Grant. And it's been a long process to get all these projects reviewed, scored, awarded, contracted. George, of course, is our deputy director, is going to be working on broader projects as well, broader programs, but we'll stay involved with GREAT, especially on the compliance and monitoring side. So those are some of the staffing things happening in our office. We have brought on, and I sent these updates out in an email a couple weeks ago, but I just wanted to kind of touch on them while y'all are here with us. We did bring on Susan Miller onto our team. We were fortunate to recruit her a couple months ago from Frontier Communications. She is our program manager for the Great Grant Program for Great Federal. And she has a long history in monitoring and compliance. So we're grateful to have her. She's going to be leading the session today on reporting. We are also in the progress of hiring 3 grant managers to work under Susan, who will be your day-to-day project contacts for these grants. We have done interviews or in the process of bringing those folks on. Also, one other difference for those of you that work with us on State Great, we do have Deshawn Knight on our team as our business officer. She has a background in fiscal work in state government, and so she has 3 positions under her for grant fiscal specialists, and those folks are will review the reimbursement requests when they come in coordination with our grant managers. So we're trying to add some capacity to that space of getting you all paid when you submit your claims. So that's those are some key staffing updates. Again, Susan is going to be covering the reporting section today. George touching on EBS, our beloved grants management system. I do have 3 quick things on reporting I just wanted to highlight before I turn it over to Susan. So you all may know, so of course, Great Grant Federal is funded with American Rescue Plan Act dollars, SFRF dollars. So we did hear from U.S. Treasury in the last month, I guess, that they are wanting in the mapping space, they're wanting us to report addresses in the CostQuest broadband serviceable location fabric, the new fabric that the FCC is utilizing. And so our great grants right now, of course, are contracted, our locations are contracted against our address NC addresses. And so we are talking with Treasury. We plan the submission, I think that's required this month. We plan to report locations using address NC, and we'll talk with Treasury about the timeline for kind of moving those, translating those locations essentially to the broadband serviceable location. And of course, that's a broader issue we're working on for our future programs anyway. And I know y'all are very involved with the BSL and with the FCC data, so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. If you have questions, please reach out and we will keep you updated. But right now we're reporting as address NC locations. One other quick thing, and Susan's going to say this too, our progress reports, we do consider those to be public. We do plan to post them and share them, partly because this is federally funded, so we already have to be sharing this with Treasury. We also have the partnerships with counties, so that's important, and I want to make sure y'all are aware of that. And then we will be basically asking for feedback for this progress report form. So it can evolve. There's a lot of pieces. We want to make sure it aligns with the Treasury guidelines and, you know, covers what's needed, but is not cumbersome for y'all or for us. So it's an evolving process. We thank you for being here with us today. And I would like to turn this over to Susan Miller.
Great. Thanks, Angie. Everyone, I'm looking forward to working with you on Great Grant. And we will be interfacing. This is going to be a two-way street. We're looking for input from you as the process goes on, and we'll be providing input and changes going forward. But thanks again, Angie, for the introduction. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview first. The progress reporting form is based on, in part, the progress reporting form from the state program in prior years, but with a number of changes. Some of them stuff that we need to report to U.S. Treasury, some of them just insights as far as what information we think will be valuable. This is our first iteration, and we'll be looking for your input later on in the year so that we can consider whether we need to revise that form or not. George will follow up after I go over some additional brief information with the technicalities of how to submit the report. And then it'll come back to me and I will actually do a walkthrough of the report and talk about some specific items on the report. And then we'll open it up for questions. Crystal, if you could give me the next slide. Okay, just a reminder, the reporting obligations are all in your grant agreement. I have the section numbers here, 2.3. Point D for those of you that are two-party agreements, in other words, that it's just you and bio. And then it's in section 2.4.D for those that have county involvement as well. So if you have questions, that's the first place to look. And we're trying to keep that in mind. Exhibit D of your grant agreement has the reporting schedule. So for most of you, the reporting forms will be due on a quarterly basis. And then if we deem a particular project as high risk, the reporting will shift to a monthly basis using the same form. And then Exhibit E was the original anticipated project report template, but it did state, and we did do some modifications since then. That was the report that we posted publicly and sent out notice last week on. And that's the one I'll be going over. Just as a highlight, The progress reports are currently in a template form on our website, and the location is given down below with a link to it. It's currently in a Word format to make it easy for you to add text and preferably not make changes to the form, please. But what we would like you to do is once it's been filled out and signed, we'd like you to print it. We'd like you to scan it for us into a PDF format or convert it to a PDF format and file it as that PDF format in EBS. And again, George will be going over how to do that. Progress reports will be published online publicly, as Angie said, and if at all possible, we encourage you not to include confidential proprietary information. If that's unavoidable, we will consider the option of allowing you to submit a confidential and a redacted form, but we encourage you strongly not to do so if there's no way to provide the information in a way that doesn't violate your confidential proprietary information. Again, the website, it's the same website that's listed in your grant agreement. And you'll have a copy of this presentation, so you can use this as a link, or you can simply go to our Great Grant Federal site and get that. Lastly, I wanted to mention, going back to the idea that these reports are going to be published publicly, we are creating a public dashboard that will show the progress of each project, both visually by dots on a map, as well as posting your reports, and also posting the basic information. Actually, I had to check on this. We're considering posting the basic information that we as the grantor have to provide to U.S. Treasury. So just want to note that once that dashboard is live, we'll send out a link so that you can go look at it and see how that's formatted. It's primarily geared towards the counties, and in particular, those counties that are partnering with some of you on your projects, because those counties also have to report similar information to the U.S. Treasury. But if you have any questions, we'd welcome that. You'll see later that questions can always be submitted to us at the on the Great Grant email, and we'll have that later on in the presentation so that you can have that for your record. That's true throughout the grant process, but we would encourage you, if you have questions at a later date, to submit them through that mechanism or concerns. Thank you. Crystal, the next page. Okay, I'll turn it over to George for the moment. He's going to talk about EBS. Thanks, George.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar names in our webinar this morning. Again, I'm George Collier, Deputy Director for the Broadband Office. So since we are NCDIT, everything we do is electronic or completed online. This is not any different for submitting progress reports for the Great Grant Federal. A number of you on this webinar are existing grantees with the great state projects. It's a similar process, very, very similar process. So everything that, for the most part, everything that we do is completed through the Enterprise Business Services EBS online access portal, and submitting a progress report will not be any different. Next slide, please. Submitting a progress report is a multi-step process for any of our grantees, and your authorized representatives who will be submitting these progress reports must have access to the EBS. And the first step in getting access to the EBS is registering for an NCID account. Registering for an NCID is fairly quick, and you can go to the website here on the slide. And just for everyone's benefit as well, we will have a copy of the slide deck for everyone. We'll also have how-to instructions available on our website as well for reference. So the first step, again, just as a review, is to register for an NCID and follow the rules for creating the NCID as defined on our how to reference document and on our slide here. And then the next step is, next slide, please, is to complete an EBS access request form. This is a very, this process in registering for access for the actual EBS actually will take some time, just because it goes through the EBS system, and it does take quite a bit of time, at least 7 days, to get approval from NCDIT, who manages the EBS online portal. Just as a point of clarification, when you complete your EBS access request form, it will ask you for your NCID username. That is the username that you created when you created your NCID account. Next slide, please. So once you get approval to access the EBS, you log into the system, and after logging in, when it's time to submit your progress report, you would go to submit. You would go to the Submit Document View Agreement link. That's the first step. Next step is next slide, please. You've got a couple of options here in your next slide for our grantees that have multiple grants. You can hit search, and a list of all of your agreements that you have access to will populate. Or if you're looking for a specific agreement number, you can include that in the appropriate field, where in that drop-down box you have agreement ID. You can specify which agreement ID you would like to populate. Otherwise, if you have multiple grants, you can hit search and populate all of the grants you have access to. Next slide. And then you would, once you populate the agreements, you can select the agreement ID that corresponds to the project that that you need to submit a report for. Next slide, please. Now that you've landed on your agreement page, and at the top of the page, you there's a link that you can choose called Submit Documents, as identified by that red arrow. Next page, please. And then this is where you'll be able to submit your documents or the progress report. So you'll begin by selecting the document type from the drop-down bar, and you should have a list of options there. One should be the progress and final report forms. You would choose that option. Next slide, please. And then you would choose files under the attachments tab, and that's indicated by the red arrow. You choose your files, and then a pop-up window will open, and you'll find your appropriate file and then click Upload. Next slide, please. Now here you have a couple of options. You can choose Save and Back, Save, Submit, or Cancel. You're not required to save prior to clicking Submit. So if you don't click Submit, then the system will just save it in this record, and it'll just sit there until you go back in and submit. And once you hit Submit, next slide, then a pop-up window will open and will ask you to verify if you would like to submit the document to our office. After clicking yes, you'll receive a notification that the document's been saved, and confirm that the document has been uploaded and submitted. And then the office will receive a notification. That'll be step number 9. And if at any time, if you all have any questions then about how to access the EBS, or need the how-to documents, you can email Great Grant. We'll also post this on our website and have this available, this recording available to you all as a reference. And I'll turn this back over to Susan.
Okay, thanks so much, George. Just wanted to break that up so you just didn't have to listen to me for a long period of time. I wanted to walk through with you the actual forms and instructions. So I'm going to switch to the bio website. And this is the one, there's a link not only in this PowerPoint presentation, there's also a link in your grant agreement, and you can even just go to the general grant websites and work your way down through the subdirectories. But in particular, this is the Great Grant Management Documents site. And right now we only have 3 documents on here. We'll be adding additional ones as time goes by. The first one I wanted to mention is the instructions for the form. We have created a set of instructions that address each line item that you need to fill out. I'm not going to read through this right now, but I just wanted to share it with you so that you know it's here. If you have any question whatsoever about what to put into the form, this is your first resource to go to. The other file I wanted to share with you now is the actual report form. This is the one that you will be working on, filling out, signing, and converting to a PDF, and then submitting through EBS. So I'm gonna look that. I hope everyone can read that. I'm just going to go through it section by section pretty quickly. I don't want to drag this out too long. And if you have any questions, again, put them in the chat. In section A, this is your general project information. The grantee name should match the official name that's in your contract, in your grant agreement. The project contact completing this form is the person who's completing the form and who we should contact if we have just basic information questions about the form, or if we're missing something, or it hasn't been completed, that kind of thing. And A3, the title is this, the person who's completing this form. It's their title, their telephone number, their email. The reporting period will be the month or quarter for which you're reporting activity. So the report that's due the end of this week is going to be the period from April 10th or later, depending on when your contract or your agreement was executed, to the end of June. So you would put those 2 dates in here, April 10th or whatever it was, May 1st, and then June 30th. The grant agreement is a different number than your application number. This is the agreement number that's printed in the top right-hand corner of your grant agreement. If you open that up, it's a number that starts with a 2 and then followed by 4 zeros and some additional characters. We just need to make sure that those numbers match so that we can track information correctly. The project title is the one that you as the applicant had originally assigned to the project. And then the county that has been assigned to the project as the primary location for the project. Technology type, most of you, is going to be fiber. We just need to make sure and have this generic because that type of project might change going forward somewhat. Section B, this is several pages long. This is all your project updates, and we've left the categories pretty much similar to what had been in the state grant program. The first section is progress on design and engineering. What we'd like is a rough estimate of how far along you are. And right now, we don't expect too many people to be up to 25%, but some of you might have already started, and that's fine. But if you could just give us a rough estimate, you can base it on, if you track hours, you can base it on the number of hours that have been put in compared to what you think the total hours will be. It's up to you, but we just want a rough estimate of how close you are to being done or where you are in the process. We'd also like significant updates. And in particular, we would like you to identify if there are any jeopardies at any point when you become aware that there might be a jeopardy to meeting one of the milestones that you have identified for your project. So in this case, if the engineering has been delayed for whatever reason, we'd like you to identify that and how you're going to address that situation. And then anything else significant, if you found that you have you're getting done faster than you expected, we'd like to know that just so that we can be aware of what's going on there. Securing assets. This is more related to things like rights of way, easements, access to poles, county permits, whatever those things might be. Even if you need to purchase land, for instance, to place a facility on, anything that you need to get approval or purchase from that equates to access, allowing you to start the construction process. We'd like to know what those assets are, and we'd like to know what the source or agency is, or who the person is, or who the organization is that you need to obtain that from. So it might be the county for permits. It might be the railway for railroad crossings. It could be any number of things, and you probably know better than I do. But we'd also like to know the status of where you are in obtaining those. So if it's pending, if you haven't done it yet, I'd call it pending. If you've submitted it, if it's under review, if you've received it, we'd like to know roughly where you are in the process for each of those items. We'd like to know this as soon as possible so that we can have a sense of what is out there, what your project requires, who's going to need to provide you with the asset or access that you need, and to get an idea of the scope. However, if you find something if you find you need something at a later point in time that you didn't realize up front, you can add it at when that time comes for the quarterly report or the monthly report that you're working on. And again, if you find anything that might jeopardize a timeline, let us know, and any information you have on how to address that situation. Materials and supplies, very similar. What challenges are you facing? Are there any delays? Are you on target? Have you obtained it already? Just any information that you have that you think would be valuable in letting us know, letting BIO know where you are with obtaining that information, or how far along you are. Do you have all your fiber ordered? Were the shipments for your huts delayed? Things of that nature. Staffing and contractors. Again, similar information, where you are with that process in general, whether you've run into any delays, whether it's, whether you're on target. We'd also like to know, broken out by design, engineering staff, and then construction and installation staff. We'd like to know whether you're using primarily in-house staff, primarily contractors, or a relatively balanced mix of both. We don't need numbers. We just would like to know what type of staff you're using for your project. Construction. Under this particular category, the only measure we're asking for right now is the number of miles of cable that you've installed. And we'd like to have it broken down by the categories of distribution and middle mile, if any. And then in each of those categories by aerial and buried. And the reason we're asking for this is because it will help our technical folks when they're evaluating the status of the project, and if they happen to come out for a field visit, they get a sense of what they need to be looking at and how much of it. Just to add a brief reminder that the North Carolina statute does not allow these projects to be middle mile projects. The middle mile, if there is any, has to be directed towards providing broadband service to end users. So in other words, it has to be needed. If you don't have that middle mile, then that would be in order to get to the end user that you've committed to, then you would be allowed to include those costs. But if you don't need middle mile, if the facilities are already in place, or if you're going to be leasing it, you would not be filling out this category for middle mile cable installed. There are, of course, some valid costs for middle mile if you're leasing, if you're building. We're not going to be discussing what's allowed and what's not on this call for cost reimbursement and what's allowed. We're going to have a separate call set up in a couple weeks or a month or so to go over that and provide you some additional details about that, and also how to submit the expense reimbursement or cost reimbursement requests. However, we do want some information on your project expenditures. We want you to populate, and this is all just for easy reference, and keep in mind this is information that we're going to be sharing. It's partially to make it easy on us in the bio team, but also for the county so that they have a quick picture of what's going on, high level, how much is completed, how much is still to be spent, that kind of thing. So the information, the project categories are, you should only fill out the rows that you use in your budget, in your grant agreement. They should match what's in your grant agreement for the total project budget amount. And then your total expenditures for the period. Some of you may have expenses, some of you may not this time. So it might be that the second and third columns for numbers would be zeros. But all of you have a budget amount, so that should be populated up front. Just a note here, if your material categories, if you want to change those or break them out, you need to request to do that, because a change in the budget needs to be approved. If it's a significant change, if you're changing more than 10%, either 10% in total cost or 10% moving it from one category to another. If it's more than 10% of your total project cost, it's going to require a contract amendment. If it's less than 10%, you need to get approval, but it's more informal. And we can provide additional information about that process if you need it. So I just wanted to highlight that point for you. When you do get expenses, or rather expenditures, you'll be filling these categories out here. It might not correspond with what you've asked for reimbursement yet, because there may be a lag. You might not request, or you might not have requested reimbursement yet, but maybe you have incurred some expenses. So for instance, if you've done some of your engineering and you have some costs that you've incurred, but you haven't asked for reimbursement yet, you still want to include all those expenses that you've incurred for the reporting period in this middle column. And then the final column is just cumulative to date. It's what we can, it helps at a quick glance show us how much of the total you've already expended. Yeah, sorry about this, but section C, this is a catch-all bucket. We don't necessarily expect you to put anything in here, but if there's something about your project that you haven't reported elsewhere and you think it's important to let us know, this is where you would do it. If there's a mile marker that wasn't covered in any of those other categories, you'd put it here. Or if it's related to the services that you're going to be able to offer, you might want to put it here if the service classes change. I can't think of anything else right here off the top of my head, but it's here as a placeholder in case something comes up and you're not sure if it goes in any other category, but you think it's important. We want you to put it here. We'd rather you share something with us, even though it might not fit in one of the other categories, rather than simply not share, and we find out later that, oh, this was something that we really should have known about in advance. Okay, shifting gears. We're almost done on the form here. Section D, provision of service. Once you get to the point in your project where you're actually able to start offering service in certain areas, we want you to let us know as soon as possible. So for the quarter, if you are starting to offer service, we want to know how many locations are involved. So broken down by households and businesses. And although we haven't asked for it in the past, if you have information about some of those locations that indicate that one or more of them might be a community anchor institution, we'd like you to identify that if you can. We don't ask you to do, we're not asking you right now to go out and do extra work to identify all those, but if you have that information based on your building, your inspections, and you say, oh, I've got, a school here or a firehouse or whatever, if you can identify those, we'd like you to share those with us. Treasury does ask for those, and we may eventually be able to utilize our mapping resources to do some cross-references, but it would be helpful if you provide that if you know it. And in this case, what I would ask is that if you have a community anchor institution, pull it out of whatever category you had it identified under in your original project. So if it was originally listed as a household, reduce your household quantity by that number and put it down in row C. Likewise, if it was identified as a business location, pull it out of business and add it to community anchor institutions. So we want the total number here ultimately to match what's in your agreement, with the community anchor institutions serving it to make up the balance. Section E, I'm not going to go into great detail here because there is only one grantee at the moment that falls in this category. There are special federal requirements for projects that have a total cost of more than $10 million. And that means not only the great grant award amount, but the matching funds and the grantees matching funds for the project. And there's a separate exhibit that has all the reporting requirements for that situation on it. It mostly relates to labor-related issues. I'm not going to pull this form up yet, but if you do have to do this, if your project is over $10 million in total costs, you will need to submit Exhibit E as well. And if that provider has any questions, feel free to contact us. If your project is under $10 million, you don't have to do anything with Exhibit E or Section E. Lastly, Section F. This is not applicable yet. We want you to let us know when you've completed your project. And this will be your last progress report. And if you've completed your project, you just check yes. Nothing else to do here. We will have a final report form that we'll want you to complete with regard to the project. And we will provide that at a later date. So this is 18 months, 24 months down the road, but and probably won't be checked by any of you for at least 12 or 18 months. However, please feel free to surprise us. Lastly, certification that the information in the progress report is true, correct, and complete to the best of your knowledge and belief. The person signing this has to be authorized to submit the form, but they don't have to be the person that completed the form. It's just, it could be, but it doesn't have to be. So if the person that's completing the form is not authorized to represent the company, then somebody else probably needs to sign this report. Again, if you have questions, let us know, but this is more of an internal, we want somebody who has the authority to say, this is true and correct, and I have authorization to submit this report to the Broadband Infrastructure Office. That is the end of my section. So I'll turn it back over to Crystal to finish out. Okay. Just as a reminder, we may need to change these reports in the future, and we will let you know if we do. But we'd also, after you've had a chance to complete your July 15th report, we would welcome your thoughts and discussions. We can set up a call if that's necessary. You can send an email to the broadband website, a Great Grant website, I'm sorry, Great Grant email, or you can contact us directly. If you have any input regarding, this doesn't work for us, or if you have an alternate suggestion that might be better off. Certainly, we're looking for input immediately following this report, but also later on in the process as well. Next slide. All right, questions and answers. So I think we'll go ahead and Crystal will moderate. We've got a few questions in the chat session. So Crystal, turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Susan. Our first question that came in is, do we have to use different EBS credentials from the ones we use to submit our application? Or can we use the existing credentials?
I'm going to turn that over to George if George is available, because he's the EBS guru at the moment.
No, it'll be the same. If you already have access to the EBS, it's the same credentials. And you would access all of the information using in the EBS using those credentials. For anyone that does not have access to the EBS, you will need to register for an NCID and then request access to the EBS. NCDIT and our privacy policy and our security policy is strongly prohibited sharing user IDs and passwords. If it comes to, I think we have deactivated, general user IDs in the past, where a grantee used a business name, for example, as the username. We've deactivated those user IDs because NCID and the EBS requires an individual name to be used rather than a generic business name. But if you currently have access, then you would use your existing credentials. You may have to update your passwords if you have not accessed EBS in a while. I think passwords expire 90 days. If you haven't used your EBS credentials, you may have to update your password in the NCID after 90 days.
Thanks, George. And just as a follow-up, can a company have more than one person registered in EBS to enter data? Yes,
they would just need to go through the registration process. But yes, multiple people or multiple representatives from a grantee can register and have access to the EBS.
Thanks. Next question.
I received a question about where folks can find those progress reports and other information. And actually, I can answer this one. It's at the webpage right there on the screen, the ncbroadband.gov/great-federal-management.
And it's also, and just as a point of clarification too, we also included the link in your grant agreements. That link should also take you to that page as well, because it is tied. The website is tied also to your grant agreements, because in the future we'll be adding clarifications, updates to your grant agreement. So you can also reference that in that document.
Fantastic. There was a question about progress reports being uploaded in the EBS system, but I believe you all have shown everyone today exactly how to upload the progress reports and what that process will be for this round of great grantees. Is there any additional clarification needed there? Susan, George, is this exactly as you've shown them today, how they'll
Yes,
upload the
ma'am.
progress reports?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. It is, and we will provide a copy of the how to submit a progress report on that same web link there, as well as how to register for EBS access.
Perfect. It looks like Angie Bailey has a few other items to mention right now as other questions are coming in. If we have any additional ones, if you have any questions, right now is your time. So please add them in the chat. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Angie, though.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. I just wanted to make sure that we stressed this, that this is the first information session for our current grantees. As you know, we're still contracting, so we will start to have more regularly scheduled information sessions, trainings for you all, especially as we get everyone contracted and bring on our grant managers. We also have a risk management vendor that will be joining us soon. And so I think that the pace of these sessions will grow. So I just wanted to say that, and also not to take away from GREAT, but while we have you, we want to make sure everyone has read and is planning to participate in the broadband expansion and access RFP that we have out. That is the vetting process for our completing access to broadband program, as well as pole replacement and stopgap. So that's really important. The information is on our website under the news section, and those submissions are due at the end of the month, July 31st. We owe questions out to you all, responses, sorry, to your questions at the end of this week. So just wanted to mention that. Thanks,
Okay,
Crystal.
we have one more question. For those grantees that just received notice, will we need to submit reports by July 15th?
Depends on the day that well, actually, it's only for those projects where the grant agreements have been fully executed. So if you've just received notice of, for instance, the second round of 30-some awards, contingent awards, no, you do not need to submit a progress report. Anything else to add, George or Angie?
Well, just each contract should have its own reporting schedule. So that would be based on what's in that reporting exhibit.
Correct. It's always good to refer back to your grant agreement, because that is the executed document and the only document that we're holding all of our grantees to regarding your reporting requirements.
We have one more question. Will there be a separate training for reimbursement submissions?
Yes. We hope to get something finalized within a couple weeks. So perhaps early August, but we'll be sending out a notice. The instructions and forms will be posted on the website. We'll receive an email about that, and then we'll have an opportunity for folks to review that and ask questions and answers.
And just to reiterate, our director just stated that this is one of many information sessions and training sessions that we're going to have with our grantees for Great Grant Federal. There are a number. This is a unique funding round that we're in, just because of the source of funds being from the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and especially for our grantees that our existing grantees out of state. There's a lot more requirements, and your grant agreements are a lot thicker than your state grant agreements. So Tim, we will have many training sessions in the future regarding the different terms and conditions of this Great Grant Federal round that we're in.
Great. We have another pun intended there. Great. What are the dates for the second round awards? And I don't know if they need the contract dates, the reporting dates. We may need a little more information there.
We just issued a press release last week for using the remaining balance of our American Rescue Plan Act funds that were appropriated from the GREAT program, and we're anticipating some future announcements here soon, this month.
George?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can I just add, and the ones announced last week were contingent, right? So there's still a fair amount of work to do before those become final awards and get contracted. But as far as any additional award announcements, like I said, we'd be using completing access to broadband funding. So it's a little bit different. So we're working through kind of what that would really look like, but trying to get those out in the next few weeks is our hope.
That concludes all the questions we have. We can wait just a minute to see if we have any additional ones. If you have any burning questions, now is the time to get them in.
And if you think about a question later on, again, you can send us an email through the Great Grant website, Great Grant email address, and we'll get those responded to. We may at some point be producing Q&As that will get posted as well.
Perfect. Well, here's the contact information to reach George and Susan here, greatgrant@nc.gov. I know we've mentioned it a number of times throughout the webinar. If you need anything great related, greatgrant@nc.gov will get that question answered for you. We appreciate you all being here today. And if you have any additional questions that you think of after the webinar, again, greatgrant@nc.gov. Thank you all so much for participating. We will have these slides as well as the recording up on the website by the end of the week. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Crystal.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Y'all have a great day and good week.